So let's go ahead and go right into hydration and the importance of hydration for performance. So let's begin with some basics on hydration. So what does happen to our bodies when we sweat? So when we are sweating, when we're exercising, our fluid needs increase. We know that, but how and why? So as we're exercising, the exercise makes our muscles generate heat. So, and you all know this. And so when you first start working out, you go through a warm up, right? The warm up is so that those muscles can get warm. And when they start getting warm, they're generating heat, which makes sense. We know this. So the way that the body releases the heat is by sweating. So we don't want our muscles to get so hot and then not be able to cool itself down. So the way the body releases the heat is by sweating. And so the way the heat is taken away, if any of you have ever had sweat beads on your arm or on your face, and then a cool breeze comes across your face or on your arms, and then the sweat dries up, that's the heat being taken away. That's evaporation. So the heat is taken away from our muscles, from our body, as the sweat evaporates. And so just to keep in mind, water is a large component of our blood. And with that, our blood transports oxygen, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals to our muscles while we're exercising. So it's incredibly important. And water also helps rid the body of waste products that are produced during exercise. So as we're exercising, we have some protein that's breaking down. So the nitrogen will get excreted in the urine. And so there's a lot of waste products, lactic acid and things like that. And so water will help the body get rid of those waste products during exercise. So that's the basics of like what happens as we're exercising and why we need to be hydrated. So now the other side, as the body loses water, this is where dehydration starts to occur. So what's going to happen is your cardiac output decreases. By that, I mean every heartbeat that your heart pumps, there's going to be less blood flow per heartbeat. So if we think in a hydrated state, there's more blood flow, that means there's more nutrients, more oxygen, and more everything that can flow through the body very efficiently. When we're dehydrated, it's not as efficient. So less blood flow per heartbeat means it's going to be harder for our muscles to use or to get blood to use for to bring oxygen and nutrients to our muscles during exercise. Also, what happens is your blood volume decreases, and that means your blood gets thicker. So if your blood is like sludgy and thick trying to get to your exercising muscles, it's probably going to take a lot longer. And that's where some of the cramping and the lactic acid and that sort of thing starts to build up because the blood is not able to flow as quickly and efficiently through your blood vessels. There's also a drop in blood flow to the, like we said, the muscles, but also the skin surface. And what happens then, if there's less blood flow to the muscles and skin surface, that means there's less heat being eliminated or being released, and that's going to drop your sweat rate. So if there's less heat that can escape, where does that heat stay? Internally, and that's not good. So if we're not sweating, we're not releasing the heat, we're not evaporating it, and so now we're running into issues with dehydration and then heat exhaustion and some other potentially really dangerous conditions. One thing to keep in mind is that our body is about 60% water. And so with that, it just shows again how important it is to be hydrated at all times. When you do become dehydrated, these are some of the symptoms that or signs and symptoms that you can experience. And just one other side note, chronic dehydration is also known as hypohydration. So sometimes we may not feel these symptoms of dehydration, but if we're not drinking enough water on a daily basis, we might actually be just chronically hypohydrated. So some of the other signs: decreased urine volume, dark colored urine, extreme thirst, and thirst is not an indicator of hydration. So you shouldn't think, well, I'm not thirsty, therefore I don't need to hydrate. That is not accurate thinking. So even if you're not thirsty, you should still be hydrating during the day or during a workout or a competition. If you feel general fatigue, nausea, and if you have experienced fainting from dehydration, those are some of the signs that you are dehydrated. So if you're looking for a simple way to determine if you're hydrated or starting to suffer from some dehydration, take a look at this chart. I know it looks kind of silly, but this is a good way to determine how your hydration levels are. So when you want to do this with your first urination of the morning. And so you take a look at your urine and kind of go according to this chart. If you're a 1, 2, 3, you're doing really well. And then as you can see, as you get closer to 6, 7, and 8, that's when you are suffering from dehydration. One thing to keep in mind, if you take vitamins, your urine might be really bright yellow, and that's just extra vitamins that you're excreting in your urine. It doesn't mean you're dehydrated. So just keep that in mind. So what are the current recommendations to maintain hydration? And so it's not as easy as it's not just drink this amount and you will be fine. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So just some general rules of thumb. Before exercise, slowly drink beverages about 4 hours before the event. And don't chug water or sports drinks. For a couple reasons. One, it's just going to cause you to urinate a lot more frequently, which that's just more annoying than anything else. And you're just not going to absorb it all. So just, sipping is completely acceptable. If your urine is dark, continue sipping beverages at 2 hours before the event. So say you use the bathroom and your urine is like a 6 or a 7. Hopefully it's not that bad, but if it is, just continue to sip on water or sports drink, and then say you use the bathroom an hour before the event and you're more of a 2 or a 3, then you know you've done a good job. This is not mandatory, but if you're practicing or competing in excessive heat and humidity, it may not be a bad idea to do a pre-practice body weight if possible. And so you weigh yourself before practice, and then you weigh yourself after practice or competition, and you drink 16 ounces for every 1 pound that you lose. So if you lose 2 pounds during a workout, then you would drink 32 ounces of fluid. During exercise, your goal really is just to prevent excessive dehydration. And so one rule of thumb too, if you lose greater than 2% of your body weight, that puts you at a high risk of dehydration, which then that's when you're having some of those signs and symptoms that we talked about. In addition to that, you could also have some lack of concentration, inability to pay attention, those sorts of things. And obviously it depends on the individual, their sweat rate, how long they're exercising for, if you provide them an opportunity to get drinks. But you really want to make sure that your athletes and your teams are able to hydrate as needed. It's best to monitor body weight changes during training and competition, like I just mentioned. And cold beverages and flavored beverages will allow for better palatability, which will increase your consumption. So some people have thought that drinking cold fluids absorbs better, but it's not actually the case. The truth is, when you drink cold beverages, you just want to drink more. So it helps hydration from that perspective, not necessarily that it absorbs better. And then for after exercise, it's important to have some sort of electrolyte source to help with fluid absorption. So this is where sports drinks come into play. Now, if you're practicing for 45 minutes and it's just very low intensity, water's probably just fine. But if it's a hard, heavy practice or workout or competition, in the heat, in the humidity, those electrolytes are going to be really important. So this is where sports drinks can really be useful. And if it is a really hot, humid day and you're only drinking water, you're not going to absorb as efficiently because the sodium in the sports drink will help with absorption. And if it's just water, you're just going to pee a lot. And as I mentioned, 16 ounces of fluid for every pound of body weight lost. And then spend time rehydrating, and don't try to do it all within the first hour post-exercise. I've seen some athletes who will lose 4 pounds during a practice, and they just drink and drink and drink and as fast as they can, and then they go to their meal and they're not hungry. So they spent so much time trying to put the fluids back in that they ended up full, and then they weren't able to recover properly. So just make sure that you spend time rehydrating. You have 24 hours or up until that next practice or competition to really rehydrate. And then you can use foods to hydrate in addition to fluids. So this is where soups, fruit, and vegetables have a very, very high water content, and so those can help with hydration as well. And just a general rule of thumb, drink 1/2 your body weight in ounces of water each day. So if you weigh 200 pounds, your goal should be 100 ounces. That's not including meals, so keep that in mind. Now, I know we covered a lot of information here, and I barely scratched the surface of how many nutrition-related topics we could cover for adolescents. But just a couple of things I really want you to remember is hydration during the day, and especially during activity, is important for health and optimal performance. Non-negotiable. Hydration has to be high on the priority list. Recovery nutrition should happen within 30 to 45 minutes after exercise in order to repair muscle damage and replenish carbohydrates. Skipping meals and not eating consistently during the day can negatively impact weight, body composition, and performance goals. And that goes back to some of those bad habits that teenage athletes have as far as not having enough time, not planning very well, and that sort of thing. So thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this, and I hope you learned some great information. Thank you.